Coming up today, Korea reports 2 more deaths from the MERS virus, bringing the death toll to 16. 5 more patients are also confirmed, bringing the number of people diagnosed with the virus to 150. The fate of a revised parliamentary law that empowers lawmakers to change government ordinances will be decided today, as it's set to be sent to the Cabinet for President Park Geun-hye's approval. Plus, it's 3 times the charm for Park Inbee as she strolls to her 3rd consecutive victory at the Women's PGA Championship in New York. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 15th of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks as always for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the MERS outbreak in Korea. That's still showing little sign of slowing down. 5 more cases were confirmed overnight with 2 additional deaths. For details, we go over to our Connie Kim at the News Centre. Connie, what's the latest?
Well, Mark, the health ministry said 4 of the newly confirmed cases are from hospitals where MERS patients are receiving treatment. Now, one is a healthcare provider who did CPR on a MERS patient just before the patient died. And what's alarming is that 3 of the 5 cases are from patients who caught the virus from patients with tertiary infections, raising concerns that this will lift the number of MERS infections. And of the 5 new confirmed cases, one is from Konkuk University Hospital, the first case to be detected there. And regarding the 2 MERS patients who passed away, one had been suffering from diabetes and one had a bad liver but no special disease. Now the death toll could rise even further as 17 MERS patients are reported to be in critical condition. Health officials had said last week was a critical turning point for containing the virus, but with more people put into quarantine yesterday, we will have to keep monitoring the situation.
And Connie, the health ministry said just this morning that a task force is working around the clock at the Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul, which has been one of the hospitals hardest hit by this outbreak. That medical center also announced on Sunday a temporary suspension of all non-emergency services until June 24th. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, Mark, in a press briefing this morning, the health ministry said a team of 24 medical personnel are being deployed to Samsung Medical Center to work on containing the virus. Now, the center is the largest source of MERS infections in the country. In addition, 2 other hospitals in Seoul have announced temporary partial shutdowns. Korea Cancer Center Hospital announced it has shut down its emergency room temporarily after finding out that 1 patient who visited the ER on Sunday had previously been hospitalized at Samsung Medical Center. Officials say the patient is currently undergoing testing for the virus. Borame Hospital has also closed its ER after discovering one of its patients was positive for MERS. After taking preventative measures, it will reopen tomorrow morning. Medihill Hospital and Changwon SK Hospital are also closed temporarily after MERS patients were found to have had contact with hundreds of people there.
And Connie, there have been concerns MERS might spread outside of Korea. This after a Korean man was isolated in a hospital in Slovakia. How is he said to be doing?
Well, the man, who is in his 30s, is currently waiting for the results of his 5th MERS test. He has undergone 4 rounds of testing with 3 negatives and 1 positive. After entering Slovakia last week, he began showing symptoms of the disease with high fever and diarrhea and was isolated right away. Seoul's foreign ministry says the man hadn't been to any of the hospitals where he would have caught MERS before his visit. The results of his 5th test will be out today. Back to you.
Now, President Park Geun-hye says minimizing the negative effects from the MERS outbreak and quickly overcoming it are just as important as eradicating the virus. At a meeting of her senior secretaries today, President Park called on officials to continuously check up on the government's targeted support for regions and industries affected by the outbreak. She urged the corporate community to resume all their business activities and Korea's overseas missions to promote the government's efforts to contain the virus and to ease unnecessary anxiety about traveling to Korea. President Park then talked about the need to establish a systematic response system to handle new infectious diseases entering the country. Meanwhile, referring to the 50th anniversary of Korea and Japan's normalization that's coming at the end of this month, President Park asked officials to seek ways to cooperate while addressing past issues between the two sides. Now, along with the fight to contain the MERS outbreak, the Korean government is battling another kind of contagion, public fear. Schools have been closing and people are in some cases secluding themselves, despite assurances from the authorities that the situation has not reached an alarming level. According to one expert, this reaction is actually natural and normal, and the government should do more to address it. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Paul Slovic, a renowned professor of psychology at the University of Oregon, says the Korean government should not disregard what they perceive as disproportionate public panic over the MERS outbreak, but should respect the reaction. In an interview with Seoul's Yonhap news agency, the risk expert explained that a relatively unfamiliar disease like MERS can quickly stoke instinctual panic regardless of the statistical risks, because of a fear of the unknown. So in one respect, he says, it is natural for people to feel an excessive amount of fear of the invisible deadly virus. He added that health authorities should pay closer attention to the public and share with them the correct information about the situation in order to reduce the amount of unnecessary anxiety. He cited the example of tuberculosis, which is a more contagious and deadly disease, but people are less fearful because they're familiar with it and more aware of how to prevent it. Slovic advised that one way to win back trust and reassure the public is to dispel any doubts about the disease by hiring reliable medical experts to answer questions that they have, instead of merely releasing instructions for people to follow. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, the fate of a revised parliamentary law will be decided one way or the other today, as the law will be sent to the cabinet for President Park Geun-hye's signature. The ruling Saenuri party has agreed to change the wording of the law to ensure it's constitutional, a move suggested by Assembly Speaker Jung Wi-hwa. The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is expected to decide today as well whether they will agree to the proposed changes. The revised law would empower lawmakers to demand changes to government ordinances when they see fit. President Park strongly opposes the law, saying the revision would encroach on her executive rights. Political wrangling over the confirmation of Prime Minister nominee Hwang Kyo-ahn is expected to rumble on this week. The ruling Saenuri party aims to put Hwang's confirmation up for a vote by the full Assembly this Monday or Tuesday before scheduled interpellation sessions start on Thursday. The ruling party, which has a majority at the Assembly, is considering a unilateral vote if it fails to persuade opposition parties to join. That is looking an increasingly likely scenario, as the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, says it will not cooperate in the confirmation process, as it concluded Hwang is unfit for the post. The Liberal camp says the nominee's failure to submit requested documents at his confirmation hearing is reason enough to disqualify him. A North Korean soldier defected to South Korea through the inter-Korean border this morning. An official at South Korea's defense ministry says the soldier, who is thought to be in his late teens, was found by South Korean troops at around 8 a.m. Korea time. That's around 4 hours ago. The official added that the soldier crossed the border at Hwacheon, Gangwon-do province, on foot and expressed his will to defect. The man's identity and his motive for defecting are still unknown, but an investigation is already underway. A US expert has warned the North Korean regime that it will collapse within a decade because its survival factors contradict each other. Jamie Metzl, a senior fellow of the Atlantic Council, predicts the regime is nearing an end as an inevitable consequence of its own insanity. Writing in the US international affairs magazine International Interest, Metzl said the continued survival of North Korea's government is based on its ability to harness absolute terror against its population, the possession of nuclear weapons, and access to economic resources. Now, Metzl says Pyongyang's development of its nuclear weapons program will ultimately put it at odds with China, raising the potential for reduced Chinese assistance. He says that with few options available for international aid, North Korea will need economic reform, which cannot be achieved without political reform, which would undermine the legitimacy of the regime. Now, after a series of ruthless executions of top military officials, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now focusing on beefing up the regime's military capabilities. Han Da-an reports.
The anti-ship rocket has drastically increased our Navy's maritime operational capacity. Those were the words uttered by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un after a test of the regime's latest surface-to-surface anti-ship missiles. According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency Monday, the drill was conducted recently by the Navy's 597th Combined Unit with Kim in attendance. The specific date of the drill is unknown. The KCNA said the, quote, ultra-modern anti-ship rocket flew at a guided altitude and hit the bullseye on target, praising its accuracy. Kim was reportedly very satisfied with the drill, saying it displayed the formidable power of the North's military. The report comes a day after the North fired 3 short-range KN-01 missiles into the East Sea. While going all out to beef up the state's military capabilities, Kim Jong-un also appears to be busy rearranging the military leadership. Speculation is high that a 4-star general in the Korean People's Army, Park Geun-hye, may have been named as Pyongyang's next defense chief to replace purged Defense Minister Hyun Young-chol. Park's name came just after that of Hwang Byung-seo, the current #1 in the North's military, in the KCNA News report on Kim Jong-un's attendance at a military arts event. Pundits also say the fact that Park's name came just before that of Lee Yong-gil, the chief of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army, could be another sign that Park has risen to become the next defense chief. And then, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's Park Inbee has written herself into the history books and regained her #1 status with a resounding victory in her 3rd straight Women's PGA Championship. The 26-year-old shot a final round 68 on Sunday to win the tournament at 19 under par at the Westchester Country Club in New York. She finished the season's 2nd major 5 strokes ahead of fellow Korean Kim Se-young, as well as taking home the winner's check for $525,000 US. Park surpassed her idol Park Se-ri with a 6th major championship and tied the tour record for the lowest score in a major in relationship to par. It has emerged that more and more healthcare-related stocks are being bought with borrowed money in Korea. Now, this is a problem because it increases the chance of a sudden crash. Local market analyst Wise FN says the outstanding margin debt on stocks traded on the benchmark Kospi reached $3.3 billion US. That's up nearly 45% from the beginning of the year. Market lending on healthcare stocks grew at the fastest rate among all sectors, soaring almost 250% to more than $290 million over the same time period. The increased investment is one of the main factors sending local bio stocks higher this year as investors bet on their rise. Analysts warn investors that local brokerage houses are coming up with measures to tighten margin lending regulations after Korea's bourse operator doubled the daily stock price limit to 30% on Monday. A recent study has found that middle-class families in Korea are having a tough time making ends meet these days. And there's one cost in particular that's negatively impacting the quality of life for millions of Koreans. Lee Ju-young reports.
Over the past 2 decades, the monthly income of the country's middle class, which constitutes roughly 70% of the total population, has seen a gradual increase. While nominal monthly earnings stood at an average of just over $700 US in the early 90s, that figure is now 5 times higher. But with the surge in disposable income has also come a rapid increase in expenses, which analysts say has brought down the quality of living. In particular, the growth in housing expenditure has far exceeded the rise in money flowing into households. This is a notable trend, especially when it comes to Geunhye homes, which require large deposits instead of monthly rent payments. Hyundai Research Institute says a greater number of people in the middle-income bracket are struggling to get by, as the average Geunhye deposit jumped 14-fold over the past 24 years, from $8,000 in 1990 to $109,000 last year. That's almost an average increase of 12% each year.
Housing expenses are increasing twice as fast as people's incomes. You have to make a living on the money after you exclude payments for housing, so if those costs rise, you end up with less money to live on. That's one of the main reasons why people feel strained in spending.
But it's not just housing expenses, but the increased cost of private education that's further straining the purse strings of those in the middle-income bracket.
The Research Institute says the average cost of private education in a three-person household accounts for roughly 17% of total disposable income, a 3.6 percentage point hike since the 90s.
I can't invest everything in my children anymore because I also have to prepare for retirement. But it's not like I can do without spending on private education, so it's hard to deal with.
Experts say the government needs to provide more rent-based homes and make it easier for people to take out loans for housing deposits, while improving fundamentals of the education system to curb excessive spending. Lee Ju-young, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a wonderful day, and thank you, as always, for watching. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.